In a land far, far away, for the 5th time, I embarked on a journey of a lifetime. So I dressed myself in a white linen tunic, a woven wool belt, and prepared to take the grueling journey to a sort of 10th century parallel world. Hello everyone, and welcome to another Food Week. This time we're exploring 10th century Arab food. And this one is really exciting because there's a primary source for it. There is a cookbook that is believed to be written around the later part of the 10th century, and it's called Kitab al-Tabiq. I don't speak Arabic, so I took one lesson to try and help with pronunciations. So I'm probably not getting them very great, but that's the best I can do. Now for this Food Week, I am wearing the 10th century dress of my potential ancestors, which are the Volga Bulgars. I say potential because I'm Volga Tatar, and there actually is no concrete fact or understanding of where we came from, what our ancestors were. And so there are 3 main theories, and the most popular of those 3 theories is that we descended from the Volga Bulgars. I also think that another theory could be that we descended from all 3 of the groups that are mentioned, but that's my own little theory. So yeah, I just hand sewed this Volga Bulgar dress from the 10th century, and I literally mean just because I finished it yesterday. So this is my first time wearing it complete. I thought it would be special for this week to wear the clothing of my own ancestors because I think that it would be really beautiful to see it as almost like being invited into the Arab world, into an Arab kitchen, into an Arab dining room, and what my ancestors may have been wearing or what they may have shown up wearing to a dinner. The generally agreed upon date at which the Volga Bulgars converted to Islam was 922, so right in the 10th century, and because of that, I am quite certain that they would have had contact with the Arab world. Not to mention that the original Volga Tatar script was actually the Arabic alphabet, so just because of all those factors, I definitely think there was a lot of intermingling and a lot of connection between the two. Now that you know what's going on with my outfit, let's go and set up the table, power up the time machine, and jump into day 1. But first, I needed to set up the table so that it could be ready for a week of feasting upon arrival. I laid out a wool cloth, my favorite clay bowl, a wooden spoon, and lit some candles. And so I set off to hop over to a multiverse where everything is exactly like it is in this one, except it is not at all out of the ordinary to wear historical clothing and eat historical food. Now, I wanted to share a little bit about my approach for this time around because I typically don't follow the exact kind of meal plans or the schedules that people of the region and time period that I cover eat. But this time around, I did want to because I wanted to kind of up the experience a little bit. This, of course, is not reenactment. There are going to be things in this video that are not accurate to the 10th century Arab world, but I want to try and implement another little bit, which is about the meal schedules. So what were 10th century Arab meal practices like? At this point in time, food was very much thought of as medicine, and it was meant to support the body and give you fuel and good health. They also had an incredibly deep focus on food hygiene and hygiene practices. The original Kitab al-Tabiq that was written in the 10th century is of course in Arabic, so I can't understand it, but someone actually translated it and wrote a beautiful book which includes some of the recipes as well as a bunch of information on cuisine practices. That book, which I'm going to be referencing a lot in this video, is called Annals of the Caliphs' Kitchen, and the English translation along with the introduction and the glossary is by Nawal Nasrallah. And I'm so grateful that this book is written because that means that I have access to all these amazing recipes. The translation of the original 10th century book is not in the public domain, but if you do speak Arabic or you can read Arabic, then you can find the original version for free, which is very wonderful. And meal times were generally twice a day, once in the morning and once in the evening, and so that is what I'm going to be practicing. Now normally I can't go without 3 meals a day and they have to be without too much gaps in between, so I'm going to see how my body feels, and if it feels like too much, then I'm gonna have some snacks in between the 2 meals to just keep my blood sugar good because I think that's the most important thing. But I'm going to do my best to stick to the schedule unless it becomes uncomfortable, and at that point I will not stick to it. In Annals of the Caliphs, it is also recommended that exercise is practiced before a meal, so I'm going to be doing some physical activity before meals, and that rest is taken after meals. Well, now that you have a whole rundown of what's going to take place, let's jump into the very first meal. But first, we need to power up the time machine. After some disorientation from the whirling and twirling and breaking of the time-space continuum, I made it to my destination mostly unscathed, ready to get started with the week. I started off preparing for the first meal by chopping some spring onions and adding them into a pot of boiling water until they were soft, after which I transferred them to a pan with olive oil and let them cook for a while. Then I took 10 eggs, whisked them together, adding in the fried spring onions, and poured the entire concoction into a frying pan. No. No, it broke! Eventually the omelet was done, but first I needed to do some physical exercise.
Some medieval 10th century jumping jacks. Some medieval 10th century jumping jacks.
And then I was ready to eat. Our very first meal looks delicious and it smells so good too. It is omelet with green onions. Let's give it a bite. See what it's like. Very, very tasty, and it's interesting because even just doing 3 minutes of exercise before this, it actually made me work up a bit of an appetite. And interestingly enough, there was no salt or pepper mentioned in this recipe, so I didn't add any, and I didn't really feel like it needed it somehow. I think that the complexity of the roasted green onion flavor really made it feel like it had a lot going on even without the salt present. So for each of these food weeks, I have a rating system where I utilize a garment from the time period and region as the rating score. So for instance, the Norse Viking food week, it was Viking tunics. The Ancient Greek food week, it was Ancient Greek chitons. And this one is going to have to be kaftans. So I give this one a, should I start off the week strong and not know what's coming next? I think I will give this one a 4 out of 5 kaftans. It was very tasty. And yeah, I'm definitely excited to eat more of it in the coming days. Well, that was the first meal, and buckle up because there are way more in the future. As recommended, I did a bit of resting. Knitting for work counts as resting, right? And so dinner commenced with a lot of olive oil and chopped onions. I added in some fresh beef and waited until this browned, then added in water, some chunks of fresh galangal, cassia, a lot of red lentils, fresh mint, coriander, and after waiting for the dish to boil for a while, I added in some olives stuffed with garlic and sheep's cheese. It is the first dinner, and tonight we're having lentil stew with meat and onions, or Abbasid. I'm very excited to try this. So many amazing spices went into this dish. I've garnished it with a bit of fresh mint and coriander as well. Everything tastes so lovely. There's just a really interesting combination of flavors. I can really taste the cassia specifically, which is the sort of cinnamon, and the added sheep's cheese and olives is such a nice touch because you get used to the food's flavor profile and then you're kind of like surprised by this more pungent cheese flavor or like a nice marinated olive. Interestingly enough, I can't taste the galangal that much actually, which I thought it would be more prominent in the flavor. Especially because in the beginning it really was very prominent. I could really smell it. This meal was nourishing and really delicious and also just interesting at the same time, so I give it a 4 out of 5 kaftans. I'm really curious what kind of meal is going to get a 5 out of 5, but we shall see. Also, I have to report and be honest that I was not able to make it from breakfast to dinner. I had some more of the omelet during the day because I just felt like I needed it. And also I ended up eating dinner kind of late. That's okay, we're gonna try it out tomorrow and I'm gonna space the breakfast and dinner a little bit closer together to see if that's helpful. Well, I'm gonna go get a good night's rest because I am tired today. I think I worked 14 hours today. So yeah, it's time to go and sleep and rest well, and I will see you all tomorrow for day 2. Day 2 began with 3 more minutes of medieval multi-dimensional jumping jacks, which are the same as modern jumping jacks in our dimension, just in medieval clothing. Welcome to day 2, how exciting! I already had my breakfast for the day and I had it later in the morning, so that way I would be able to be more likely to make it until dinner without feeling hungry. I had quite a large breakfast as well. I ate the leftovers of the omelet from yesterday, and after I was done eating it, I kind of remembered this little thing in the recipe where it says to serve it with a bowl of vinegar, which I also didn't do yesterday. So I have a little bit left for tomorrow and I'm going to do that tomorrow to see how it changes the flavor. That was really good. I think even better than it was yesterday. And then I had some leftovers of the stew, which was also even better than yesterday. And today I'm wearing a head covering that was really common all throughout the medieval period and even in ancient Greece. It's a really simple head covering. It's just a big strip of linen cloth that you wrap around your head and then you pin. Well, I think that's all of the updates, and I will see you all a little bit later. After breakfast, I decided to have a little break, first with some knitting, and then I had a desire to pick up a book. This video is sponsored by Hungry Minds. If you just so happen to have woken up in another dimension or time traveled like me and just so happen to need to try and rebuild a civilization, I've got you. This is called The Book, the ultimate guide to rebuilding a civilization by Hungry Minds, and they are the sponsor of this video. I guess my mind was feeling hungry and not just my stomach. This beautiful book features creative reinterpretations of inventions throughout history. All of the stunning illustrations are hand-drawn by a team of 11 human illustrators, and it's so strange how we live in a world now where that has to be specified, but alas. And the illustrations just so happen to be in one of my favorite art styles. They remind me of Victorian illustrations that I've seen on fashion plates, Victorian advertisements, and more. Over 5,000 hours of work went into this book, and you can really tell. The moment I held it in my hands, I could feel how high quality it was, and I also love how they've added some texture and discoloration to the pages inside to make it look like it's time traveled to you. The fabric cover and silver foil stamping of the cover feel just like some of the antique books in my collection. And I've actually always wanted to own a modern book that has such a deeply antique feel to it. The book covers so many different topics, but the ones that stood out to me the most were how to make glue from bones, which was incredibly informative. The loom and sewing machine, of course, since these are inventions that I hope society never forgets. Processing cotton and spinning yarn, which are also very important. Tips about edible and inedible plants, how to make rubber, which was a completely new process to me, but very fascinating. Information on beekeeping, how to make simple tools, and storytelling. It was very difficult to choose which topics to mention due to how much useful and beautifully presented information is in the book. The pages also have tucked away surprises and hidden Easter eggs, so when I first opened the book, I ended up getting sucked in for a couple of hours due to how layered all of the illustrations are. If you'd like to get your very own copy and feel transported into another world like I did, click the link in the description box and use promo code Birchwood10 to get 10% off of your order, which is valid only until May 4th, 2025. Thank you so much again to Hungry Minds for sponsoring this video, and now I think I'll find one of the hidden traveling stones, and that way I'll be able to get back home to my correct time period and correct multiverse so I can continue with the food week. The magic stone took me back into the right multiverse, thankfully, because otherwise that would have sucked and been super confusing, and I even got back all in one piece. Just in time, because this food week wasn't going to cook itself. I got to making some bread, but this was mostly a test loaf as I have little bread making experience. Normally I can't eat wheat due to a food sensitivity, but after a couple of prior failed attempts, I have been able to recently introduce one type of wheat into my diet. It's called einkorn, and some individuals with wheat sensitivities are able to consume einkorn successfully, and I guess I'm one of them now. It is an ancient wheat variety believed to be more than 12,000 years old, and the oldest wheat known to scientists. Remnants of einkorn were even found with the Iceman mummy Ötzi, and it was a part of his final meal. I think it's kind of funny that I can only eat antique wheat. I mixed some water with einkorn flour and continued to mix it and knead it with my hands, and einkorn flour can be a bit more sticky than usual wheat flour according to the internet, and so it took a while along with quite some olive oil to get a consistency I was happy with. I set the bread to bake in the oven and then accidentally deleted the footage that shows the final result of the bread all baked, but believe me, it turned out pretty decent, and the taste was delicious. The next thing I needed to prepare was actually a condiment that I was going to be using throughout the entire week. It's called murri, and it's very prevalent in 10th century Arab cooking and beyond. Here's a recipe for murri that is from the 13th century version of Kitab al-Tabuk, as there are actually two versions of the book. The 13th century one was written by Muhammad bin Hassan al-Baghdadi. The original version is fermented typically for 90 days. However, there's also a quick version that was sometimes made, and someone on the internet very kindly posted an instant murri recipe. So that's the one that I ended up following. I added some anise seed, fennel seed, nigella, and celery seed, and toasted it all in a dry pan. And then once toasted, I ground it down with a pestle and mortar, as well as a small amount of walnuts. Then I took some of the bread I made earlier and toasted it in the oven for a long time until it was very dark brown, and proceeded to grind this down in the pestle and mortar as well. This recipe normally calls for a mix of fresh quince that gets cooked and honey, but quince isn't in season at the moment, so I got the next best thing. This is quince honey, as in honey already infused with quince, and it is delicious. I kept boiling it and then turning it off the heat so that way it could caramelize. And then I added in all the ground ingredients from earlier along with some water, a pinch of saffron, and so much salt. I was really shocked by how much salt the recipe called for. After that, I added in carob powder, some oat starch, lemon juice, and I let everything boil until it formed a thick paste. I'm going to give it a taste, a tiny bit. So salty, but it's good. It's so salty, it reminds me so much of miso actually. Wow. And finally, it was on to dinner preparations. I stabbed some aubergines with a time-traveling fork a bunch of times. It was a pretty nice way to get out some pent-up frustration actually, and then I set them into a pot of water to boil. One thing I love about so many of these recipes is that the measurements are often to taste. Some of the recipes in Kitab al-Tabuk or Annals of the Caliphs' kitchens are specific with their measurements, but many aren't, like this one. I added a bunch more olive oil and sesame oil to a pan and cooked the aubergine or eggplant depending on which English you speak, and I spiced it up with some dried rue leaves, black pepper, caraway seeds, and some of the murri from earlier. On the menu for tonight is eggplant of Buran, and Buran was the wife of the Abbasid Caliph al-Maamun. She apparently was quite famous for her eggplant recipes, and this is one of them. And I'm really excited to try this. I even have my own first baking of bread attempt, so that's nice to eat that with it. I topped it off with a little bit of goat's yogurt and some coriander as well. All right, let's give it a try. This is absolutely delicious so far. You can taste the added murri. It's been a very long day, so I'm going to talk about this quickly because I really need to go to bed. I would say that it was really good, but it wasn't like an incredible, wow, this is so amazing kind of meal. So I give this a 4 out of 5 kaftans. Again, just a solid, really good meal. But I haven't had anything yet like I did during the Ancient Greek Food Week when I ate those honey glazed prawns. Wow. Wow. I'm gonna cry. Am I gonna cry over these prawns being this good? It was mind-blowingly good. Before I go to bed though, I am actually going to eat the final remnants of the soup from yesterday because this meal obviously isn't enough for me for dinner, so I'm going to do that, but we already know what that tastes like, so I'm just gonna do that off camera. And I surprisingly didn't get that hungry between meals because I ate enough for breakfast and I had less time in between breakfast and dinner, so it worked out quite well. Well, let's see what's in store for day 3. It is day 3, and today for breakfast, I ended up having the rest of the aubergine or the eggplant, and I had this topped with some more goat's yogurt, and then I also had the final amount of the omelet from day 1, and I actually used vinegar this time with it, and it was way better, so I think that was a good call. Additionally, I took some of the test bread from last night, and I put a little bit of the quince honey on it. That was absolutely delicious. Quince honey is absolutely amazing. And I'm feeling really excited about tonight. I'm going to be trying out a different bread recipe, and I'm going to see how that one goes because I'm not the most experienced bread maker, but I'm willing to give it a shot. I'm also just really grateful that I managed to reintroduce einkorn into my diet because it just makes everything so much easier, especially with these food weeks. One thing I have noticed is that the murri makes me very, very thirsty, and I think it's because it's quite salty, and it's similar in salt content, I would say, to how I experience miso in regards to the amount versus how salty it is. but I've noticed that I'm so thirsty in a way that miso never makes me thirsty. So tonight's meal has a couple parts, so I'm going to go and start cooking because there's quite a lot to prepare. And I'll see you all later. So now it was time to make the actual bread for the week, and not just the test one. So I was back with the einkorn flour again, adding in water and kneading the dough until I got it to mostly not stick to my hands. I rolled the dough into small balls and set them for a while to rest. Now that I'm making the bread for a while, I thought I'd give some important info. I didn't go too much into detail about Kitab al-Tabik yet, but it's especially unique because it features food of the Abbasid era ranging from the 8th to 10th centuries. Al-Warrāq, who was probably a professional manuscript copy editor, wrote this amazing resource which has around 615 recipes, which is just phenomenal. And more than 100 people are featured in the book, along with over 20 cookbooks penned for and by physicians, literary and political figures, princes, caliphs, etc. It even features cooking-related poems. How cool is that? Due to the simplicity of its language, it is believed that Kitab al-Tabik was for non-elite people, or at least people cooking non-royal food, but all from the approach of haute cuisine. After rolling the dough as thin as possible, I set it on an upside-down metal tray in the oven to bake. It took a couple of attempts, but eventually I mostly got it to be almost paper thin, which was my goal. I boiled some soaked chickpeas in water, added in some onion, and cooked it until it became a thick paste. Then it was a sprinkle of coriander seeds, black pepper, more murree, lemon juice, gum arabic dissolved in water, and everything got mixed together. In a pan with olive oil, I attempted to fry the mixture, but it didn't go great at first, so I tried again, which was a little bit better. Then I needed some sauce for everything. I very lightly fried some onions and garlic and added chopped mint, parsley, and dried roux to goat's yogurt and stirred all the ingredients together. I topped off the chickpea dish with sauce and had to add this cute little piece of parsley for a final touch. Hello parsley, you're so little and adorable. It is night 3 and I've been cooking for so many hours and I'm so ready to eat this food. I was definitely getting very hungry whilst I was cooking. And so this is basically like an omelet but without eggs. So it's literally called omelet Asia without eggs, and it's made from chickpeas. And I topped it off with some yogurt sauce, which is called jajak in the book, and it's similar to tzatziki apparently. As I was making it, I sort of forgot that I didn't have any cucumbers in the house, and it was too late by the time I realized it to get any. So this is round 1, and later in the week I'm gonna make it again, but with cucumber. The bread that I made is very often referenced in this book, and it's called al-Warrāq. And it's a paper-thin bread, and I tried my best to get it as thin as I could so that it would puff up, but einkorn or einkorn, I never know how to say this grain. I probably should learn it correctly since I'm gonna be eating it all the time now. But this grain tends to be a little bit more sticky, so I had to use a lot of flour, and because of that, I had some issues with it sticking a bit to my board as well as my rolling pin, so I did my best to work with what I had. And I think it turned out pretty decent. This one is shaped like a crescent moon, which I think is quite beautiful actually. That was not intentional, that was me just not being great at baking bread yet and struggling a little bit. This bread is a lot like a cracker. I in fact tried it whilst I was cooking and it was really, really nice. And so I'm excited for it to go with this dish. All right, well let's dig in. I'm really ready for food. The combination of the chickpea omelet and the yogurt sauce is so good. Try a little bit of the bread now. Nice and crispy, that's what I wanted to go for. And I actually think this needs a little bit more jajak, so I'm going to go and grab it and add more on top. That should be enough, hopefully. All right, now it's doused in jajak, so it's gonna be even better. Super good. I couldn't quite finish everything on my plate because I put a lot of food, and so I'm going to have a nice breakfast for tomorrow morning. I also have a bunch more of the mix left, so I'm going to be eating that in the morning as well. And I'm going to try mixing it with a little bit of flour as well to see if that helps to thicken up the consistency. I just didn't want to overdo it with the gum arabic. That's the downside of these more vague recipes that don't actually give you specific amounts. You don't always know with things like gum arabic, for instance, which is kind of an important ingredient, how much you actually need to get a good consistency. So yeah, I'm going to play around a little bit more with the recipe tomorrow and see if I can get a more formed patty that doesn't just fall apart. The final one I made was the best of all of them, but the first two were but it still tastes really good. The coriander flavor was pretty prominent, the coriander seeds specifically, and I really, really liked it. And it paired up so nicely with the sourness of the yogurt as well. This is definitely the best meal I've had yet during this week, so I'm going to give it a 5 out of 5 kaftans. It's just really, really nice, and I think especially if I get the patty consistency even better, it'll be that much better because it'll crisp up even more. I'm really glad I don't have to cook anything else tonight because I'm pretty done with cooking for the day. And I will see you all tomorrow for day 4. And then it was day 4, and my mental health was not feeling the best in the morning, so I didn't feel like being on camera until later on. I added a little einkorn flour to the chickpea mix from the day prior to see if it would help the consistency, and it did a little bit. Then I finally was able to get cucumber, so I scraped out the middle bit, chopped the outer bits, and added it to the mix from yesterday, topping it off with some more yogurt. The chickpea no-egg omelette was even better on this day with the little adjustments and additions that I made. And then it was on to dinner time. I set some sheep meat into a pot of water, and I wanted the bone there especially to help add flavor and nutrients to the broth, and I let it boil for quite a long time until it was soft enough to break apart with a pestle. Then I added in some goat's milk, more water, and I let it boil until it was even softer, at which point I added in rice and then let it boil even longer, stirring it regularly until it eventually had a nougat-like consistency. Dinner tonight is rice porridge with meat and with a side of the bread that I made yesterday, and I topped it off with some cucumber medallions and some coriander and some murree, just a tiny bit to give it some flavor. The cucumber medallions were one of the recommended garnishes in the Annals of the Caliphs' kitchens. They talk about some of the garnishes that were commonly used in the 10th century Arab kitchen, and cucumber medallions was one of them, so I thought I would go for it. Pomegranate seeds is another one, but don't have pomegranates at the moment, and I think they're actually quite out of season as well, so. And the bread is often used to kind of scoop up the meal and eat with it. So, all right, let's dig in. Stir in the murree first. This looks amazing. It looks like melted cheese on bread. I have no idea why, but for some reason this tastes like a quesadilla. And it's such a bizarre thing to correlate to, but yeah, it tastes a lot like a quesadilla with meat. It's really good though. I can totally see how this would also be such easy to eat comfort food. You wouldn't even need a spoon. You could just use the bread to scoop up the dish and use it like a utensil. I really enjoyed this meal. It was extremely delicious. I loved how you could eat it with your hands, with the bread. I could imagine another piece of bread being used as a plate or a bowl too, and you could just eat with one bread on top of another piece of bread. Yeah, this is just such lovely food, and I feel like it's very homely food. It's the kind of food that you would eat maybe at your mother's house or your grandmother's house, something like that. Very nice. It reminded me, oddly enough, of the cod dish that I ate during the Norse Viking Food Week. There was this like cod stew, and it was a very similar consistency to this meal. I give this one a 6 out of 5 kaftans. I feel like, though, if you're not into gooey taffy-like consistencies, then you probably won't like this very much, but I really enjoyed it personally. I thought it was a fun experience consuming it. And yeah, so that's why I get such a good rating. All right, well, day 4 has been very successful. It is day 4, right? And I will see you all tomorrow for day 5. It's day 5. Hello. Wow, how is it day 5 already? I don't know. I'm feeling a lot better this morning than I was yesterday morning, that's for sure. For breakfast today, I had some of the leftover rice and meat porridge from last night. And I know it's a little bit risky eating rice the next day, so I made sure to follow like all the food safety precautions, you know, storing it properly, refrigerating it quickly, and heating it thoroughly before consuming it again. I really like to avoid food poisoning anytime I can. That's preferable. And I've been taking long walks before eating breakfast recently, and that's been really nice. That's been the exercise that I've been choosing before my meals. I'll see you all for the cooking process. And I was back to cooking. I poured some water into a pot and wrapped a bunch of cumin seeds into a linen cloth with twine, setting it into the water. Who knew sewing things could come in handy for cooking too? I added in some chicken and salt to the pot, along with chickpeas, and cooked it for a while. Once half done, I added in 3 small onions and some aged sharp cheese, and let it cook until it was very soft. Then it was black pepper and some eggs, which I cracked on top and let them set in the heat of the pot. I feel especially excited for this dinner for some reason. It just looks so beautiful. The presentation and the broth looks so sumptuous. I think sumptuous is the best word that I can think of. It's like a nice piece of fabric. I know it's weird to compare broth to fabric, but that's what I'm feeling like. This is called broth of chickpea or mahimas. But it's not just chickpea, it also has chicken in it. I don't know if they were like going for a probably not, because it's probably not the same words in Arabic. But anyways, there's also egg in it, which further goes with this whole chickpea, chicken egg kind of theme. This is giving me flashbacks to the medieval food week where I made that dish where it was like chicken crowned with eggs and medieval people were trying to like have a little joke and be funny. But yeah, it's kind of reminding me of that a little bit because of the inclusion of the chicken and the egg. I have no idea what to expect with the taste, so let's just give it a go and see how it is. As you can tell too, I finally got some good sleep because I'm finally feeling it's just a lot more peppy. Wow. Well, this is nice. I feel like the happy food dance is a special kind of dance. I just bit into some weird cartilage. That was not very happy. The fact that I garnished it with mint and coriander was such a good call. It pairs up really nicely with the flavors. I really enjoyed this dish. I think perhaps more than any other dish this week so far. So that's quite something because there have been some pretty great dishes this week. I give this one a 6 out of 5 kaftans. Definitely a super delicious meal. I think I could have cooked the chickpeas just slightly longer and then maybe added a little bit more salt. But other than that, it was so good. I also found it so interesting as well how old cheese was added to the broth to help give it, I guess, a more complex flavor profile. That isn't something I've seen done very often in dishes, so that was a really interesting way to just create a little bit more flavor. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what's in store for tomorrow. Well, it's day 6, and I can't believe that the week is almost done. Wild. I haven't been talking about it all that much, but I've been managing to keep up with the 2 meals a day schedule fairly well. There have been a couple of instances where I needed to eat in the middle of the day, or, you know, sometimes when I'm cooking like with the bread, I had a little bit to try it. But I also feel like that could be very accurate considering that snacks aren't really counted as a complete meal. I think the trick was to space the breakfast later and then eat the dinner at a reasonable hour for me. For breakfast this morning, I had the leftovers of the chicken and chickpea broth, which was a lot uglier than it was yesterday because I had to mix it up when I was heating it. And yeah, it ended up getting kind of funky looking because of that. Everything's kind of just blended together, but it was still very tasty. And we've got a couple of meals left, and I'm really looking forward to you all seeing what those ones are. Finally, the gourd got to make its debut. It was quite the process getting this gourd, which probably isn't even the species that existed in the 10th century Arab world, but it is the best that I could do. They aren't exactly in season right now, so I asked a friend with a garden if she had any left from last season, and thankfully she did and gave me a couple. I'm very grateful. Squash and pumpkin are of course indigenous to the Americas, but some gourd varieties are indigenous to Africa and Asia. That's why you see it pop up so much in Kitab al-Tabik, and I even saw it come up in the ancient Greek food week as well. Oops. Well, half of it ended up in the pot. I added the chopped gourd and onion to the water along with some washed lentils, and after having a little fun with the lentils, I added in more murree. This actually looks so pretty right now. Look at it. Wow, that was very satisfying. And then a lot of cumin and some extra water, and I let the contents boil. Dinner tonight is a stew recipe called marka, and it's made to be for coughs, apparently. I don't have a cough or anything like that, but it just sounded good, so I wanted to try it. I've topped it off with a little bit of coriander, and also I wanted to see what it might be like with some yogurt because I felt like it might taste really good together. So I have a bit of yogurt on the side, and after I try it without the yogurt, I'm gonna pour the yogurt in and mix it together and see how much better it tastes or if it adds to it. Okay, let's give it a go. Really tasty. It's just a really nice and hearty lentil stew recipe. I've definitely made things in my own home very similar to this for dinner. Now let's try with some yogurt poured into it. See what happens. It's fun to watch it pouring in the candlelight. I feel like I'm so easily entertained by the funniest things. Let's mix it in and see how that is. I think I like it even more with the yogurt. It just adds a sourness to it, which is something that I felt like it was missing. So I really enjoyed this meal, but I didn't like it as much as the dinner yesterday. So I'm going to give this one a 4 out of 5 kaftans. It was really nice, but the flavors were fairly straightforward. The gourd, the lentils, the cumin. It wasn't anything that was too different than things I've consumed in the past. So because of that, it has a bit of a lower rating. It just didn't really surprise me with the flavors that much. I still feel that like it was a solid, hearty meal, very nourishing. And I feel like as well, it would appeal historically to people of all economic statuses, because the lack of meat means that it's more affordable for people back then who perhaps couldn't afford meat. Well, tomorrow is the final day, day 7, and I feel like so far this week has been so wonderful, such a beautiful experience to get to try some of this 10th century Arab cuisine. And tomorrow there's also going to be a dessert, which I'm really looking forward to. I might even make it during the day so it has a lot of time to cool. Hint, hint. See you all tomorrow for the final day. And so it was somehow day 7? How was it day 7 already? I got to making yet another omelet by waving to you all in the reflection of the bowl, and then cracking 10 eggs, adding in 1/3 cup of goat milk, and grinding some pistachios with the pestle and mortar, and then some walnuts, and finally some almonds. This was way more work than it looks like in the footage, and afterwards I was so tired. Well, I think that was my physical exercise for the first meal. Then I whisked it all together until well blended and poured the mix into a pan with olive oil. I was pretty nervous to flip it because I could just already tell that it probably wasn't going to hold its form. No! This is so bad. Okay. So the last breakfast, day 7 today, is a white omelet. And I'm very excited to try it because I absolutely loved the nut omelet during the Ancient Greek Food Week. In fact, I've made it a bunch more times since then. Outside of the Food Week, it was that good. And this is very similar to the nut omelet in many ways, so I'm going to give it a try. I also love pistachio. My wallet does not love pistachio. It's really good. I think I liked the nut omelet more because it was a little sweeter. I'm wondering how this would taste with a little bit of honey on top. I'm just ignoring the little bottom crust where I burned it slightly. I'm gonna go get the honey. Okay, I've got some honey. It's just the plain honey without the quince. The honey's smeared all over it. Wow. With the honey, it has to be like one of my favorite meals I've had during all of these food weeks. It's very similar to the nut omelet. Yeah, the honey was definitely a good call. I'm gonna give this one a 7 out of 5 kaftans. It was that good. I'm gonna enjoy the rest, and I'll see you all a little bit later for dinner time. I began dinner preparations by grinding some chopped onions in the pestle and mortar, eventually adding in fresh coriander and doing the same. I put way too much in the mortar though, so it was a little bit of a challenge. Then in a pot, I added fresh beef along with a lot of olive oil, enough salt, and then I let that cook for a little while until brown. Then I added in the onion and coriander mixture and gave it a stir again. Once fairly cooked, I ground black pepper and sprinkled some cumin and azafetida. Eventually, it was murray time, and finally a little bit of water so that all of the ingredients could get nice and tender. It is the final meal, and I really am looking forward to this. It smells amazing, all the spices. So good. I'm at the very end of my SD card storage. My candles are nearly out. Perfect timing though, because we just have this to film and the dessert, and then we wrapped up the whole week. Tonight on the menu is a meat dish with asafoetida, which is this really interesting spice that I first tried in the Ancient Greek Food Week. To my knowledge, I may have had it in food and not known. And I was excited to see it pop up again because, yeah, I already had it in my spice cupboard. In Arabic, it's anjadhania. I might be getting that incorrect, but that's at least how I think it's pronounced. If you speak Arabic, please correct me in the comments. And it's topped off with some fresh coriander and the final piece of bread that I made some days ago. Thankfully, it's like crispy, crackery bread, so, you know, it doesn't need to be fresh or anything like that. And at the very final part of the cooking process, I cracked an egg on top and let that set, so it's probably a bit runny. It's gonna be really nice. All right, let's give it a go. It smells awesome. Whoa, this is so good. Wow. I often don't know what more to say about the meal than just really, really good. Like, there's not a lot of words to describe that kind of feeling with food. Silencing good? Can that be a thing? Because I feel like a good meal makes you feel silent. Delicious. I've lost a candle now, and I'm afraid the other ones are all about to die. I mostly shoot my videos with candlelight and natural lighting, so I will lose my light if they die. So I'm not going to finish this on camera, but I will give it a 7 out of 5 kaftans. It was such a good meal. Absolutely amazing. The whole day has just been one excellent meal after another, and I have a feeling the dessert is going to be the same. So let's switch over to that. But first, let's go back in time a little and cross the time-space continuum and see how exactly I made the dessert. Welcome to the past, where I boiled some honey in a pot until it caramelized, and I attempted to scrape the froth off of it, but it was mostly froth at some point, so this was not exactly possible. And then I poured in a ton of sesame seeds until the mix was essentially one big clump of ingredients. And the recipe said to set the mix on a greased slab of marble. I have a slab of marble actually, but I use it for painting, so didn't exactly want to cross-contaminate paint with food. So I used the next best thing, a metal tray lined with baking paper and sesame oil. At first, this was pretty tough to spread out, but as it cooled, I found this method of hitting it with a wooden spoon so that it became more even, and that seemed to work. So this is a recipe called natif, and it is a sesame honey nougat, and it is topped off with a little bit of fresh mint. It's a very simple recipe, just a few ingredients, but I have a feeling it's going to be really delicious. So let's give it a try. So good. I've had this before, maybe in my childhood. I feel like there's something similar in Tatar culture actually. It also reminds me a lot of halva. I love this. It immediately transports me back to my childhood for some reason. I feel like the mint leaves are a really nice palate cleanser just in between bites. That wasn't in the book or anything. I just thought to add them because it might be nice together. Put a little bit too much on my plate there, so I'll be saving these pieces for later. Thankfully they keep for a while. I'm also gonna give this meal a 7 out of 5 kaftans. It's been a 7 out of 5 kaftan day, and I just realized none of the meals this week received that low of a rating because they were all super good. They were all very, very tasty, and I guess also flavors that I tend to gravitate towards and I actually tend to really enjoy, so maybe I'm a bit biased, I don't know, but this was just overall such a good food week. I'm so grateful that Kitab al-Tabik exists and that al-Warrāq took the time to collect all these really important pieces of history and put them together in the 10th century, and it's just amazing that now we can still read and make recipes from this book. And I'm also so grateful that Nasrallah translated all that information into English, because then I actually have access to it and anybody else who's English speaking. My favorite dishes for this week were the entirety of today. Everything today was my favorite for the entire week. It's amazing that I somehow planned it that it ended on that note. Everything was just incredible today, and I really enjoyed all of it. Thank you so much for watching and for being a part of this adventure with me of exploring 10th century Arab cuisine. Alright, well, I have to get back to my original dimension and my original time period, so at least I've got some snacks for the road. Are there roads in space? The journey. All right, well, this week is ending. I feel really sad and kind of bittersweet that it's ending. Aw, I'm getting sentimental. Also, I'm going to be taking a small break from posting a video because the next one after that is a pretty big project and I need some extra time for it. So I will see you all on May 2nd, 2025 for the next video. All right, take care. See you all in the next one. Feels like it was my birthday or something.